heard a lot of people having sex on the cup.
Welcome back to Ducks Morning Brew. It's a good one. It's a morning after a Ducks win, a big Ducks win. Apologies if you can hear this in the background too. I've got a major windstorm here, so it's pretty wild out there. Let's get that out of the way quickly here. But yeah, it's a nice morning after a Ducks win. A fun game last night. Another one of those games. I think this week we chatted about their must-win games in there against teams you should be beating. The way the Ducks are playing this year in Seattle, and then obviously Arizona tomorrow. The Ducks handled their business. They dominated pretty much throughout the entire game. We'll dive into that and review some of the positives from that game. Not really any negatives from last night's game. We're going to look at, will the Ducks extend Dallas Eakins? Elliot Friedman, in his 32 Thoughts article, talked about a few coaches who've already received extensions and the three who are their contracts are up at the end of this year, and Craig Berube in St. Louis, and Dean Evanson in Minnesota, and obviously Dallas Eakins here in Anaheim, and whether the teams will extend those coaches or not. They're all playing well. I would imagine they will, but we'll dive a bit more into what the Ducks' plans could be with Dallas Eakins. And also in that article, there was a mention that the Arizona Coyotes are listening on Jakob Chychrun. The 23-year-old defenseman had 18 goals last year and 41 points in 56 games. He is on a really, really great contract, would be a great young piece for any team, but the price, of course, has been quoted as being astronomical. So we'll take a look at that and if the Ducks could potentially be in on a player like Jakob Chychrun. Now, a little bit easier with the Coyotes playing in the Central Division. It's not an in-division trade, so it's not as hard to fathom that that's a possibility. But first things first, let's dive into last night's game and look at some of the positives. So obviously the Ducks walked away last night at home with a 4-1 victory against the Seattle Kraken. They dominated pretty much throughout the entire game. I mean, the first and third, it wasn't even close. The Ducks were clearly the best team. They controlled, I think, almost over 60% of their shot attempts in both of those periods. Expected goals were, in a similar category as well. The second period, the Kraken kind of jumped a little bit back in it. Stolarz had to make a couple more big saves. He only had 19 on the night. A pretty quiet but good night from Stolarz. The Kraken got their only goal in the second period, but the Ducks also got one early as well. So it was a better period for the Kraken, but still one the Ducks kept under control and kept close. So overall, a commanding victory from a team that's been playing really well against a team that they should be beating. And we mentioned this last night. The Kraken have been better as of late. They're 6-3-2 over their last 11 before last night's game, so they've been playing a little bit better, and that top line was still dangerous. And outside of Yanni Gourde, they're a fairly healthy team, getting both of their goaltenders back and pretty much all their players. So it was still a good effort from the Ducks. And you look at the guys who got on the board, it's exactly the guys you want to see contributing, right? So you get Trevor Zegras, who scores his 7th of the season, the first of the night, off a nice chip pass off the boards from Sonny Milano. You had Derek Grant, who chipped in with a shorthanded goal. Troy Terry on the power play, showing how great his hands are in tight with a nice little hesitation, toe drag, and just snipes it top corner. Really great goal from him. And then Sam Carrick chips in for the fourth line to grab a goal as well. So it was a really well-rounded effort from both the Ducks special teams, power play and shorthanded, even strength. The fourth line has been playing really well with Sam Carrick, Nick Deslauriers, and Buddy Robinson. So just a really good effort all around. And I think there's a few things I walk away with is, one, Troy Terry is unreal. I mean, that guy, the way he's been playing over the last few games. I put out a tweet this morning that he's been shooting the puck way more lately, which is just another added level to what he's been doing. He's got 3 goals in his last 2 games, obviously 2 the other night and then 1 last night. And over his last 4, he's had 18 shots on goal, which is about 4.5 shots per game. In the 26 games prior to that, he had 54 shots on goal, which is just over 2 shots per game. So I don't know what he's done. I don't know what he's decided to add to his arsenal here, but he's been shooting the puck a lot more, and obviously it's been paying off. This last little 4 to 5 game stretch from Troy Terry is arguably been his most impressive stretch of play, and he had a 16-game point streak this season, so that's pretty impressive to say the least, that he's been able to play this well over the last little stretch here. And then Sam Carrick and the fourth line as a whole, I've really been impressed with how they've played and their commitment Again, they're likely going to come out on the opposite end of the shot attempts at the end of the night. The underlying numbers aren't going to be too kind to them, but I like their effort every time they're out there. They've had a few extended plays in the offensive zone over the last couple games. I think their size, their tenacity has really taken some teams by surprise, and I think Sam Carrick is really the star, if you want to call it, of that fourth line. He's been a real nice player for the Ducks this year, and the Gulls just announced that Greg Pattern is their captain, and obviously Sam Carrick was the captain last year. So that's a good sign for Carrick that he's done enough to be up here for the rest of the year, which I would agree with. He has. He is exactly the type of player you want on the fourth line for the Ducks, and I'm glad that hopefully that means he's going to be up here for the rest of the year and continue to play on the Ducks' fourth line. They'll have some decisions to make when everybody comes back healthy, because Maxime Comtois is very close to returning, according to Dallas Eakins, and at some point Adam Henrique's going to come back. But I imagine at some point there will be some trades too, whether it's Raquel or Steele or somebody like that will be moved out. So Sam Carrick seems to have a roster spot for the rest of the year, and hopefully moving forward, because he's been a really nice addition to the Ducks' bottom six this year, and he's got, I think, 6 goals on the season now, one behind Trevor Zegras. So he's had a really good year. That's not a slight on Zegras too. That's just showing how good Sam Carrick has been this year. So a good win, and bodes well, hopefully heading into Friday against the Coyotes. All right, let's quickly move on to the Dallas Eakins contract extension talk. As Friedman noted at 32 Thoughts, Dallas Eakins' contract is up at the end of the year, and the Ducks are going to have a decision to make not only on him, but they also have an interim general manager in Jeff Solomon, and we'll have to make a decision and have some interviews on what they're going to do there. So I don't expect any decision to be made until the end of the season. Same with Jeff Solomon. This seems like a decision that the ownership group will take back and do their due diligence on near the end of the year. They'll look at Dallas Eakins, the way he handled the locker room this year, how the team did. Obviously, they're doing great and sitting in top of the Pacific Division, so that's going to help his case. And I don't think he gets enough credit for what the Ducks have done this year, mostly because they've been so bad over the last couple of years, and there's been a lot of decisions where we've scratched our heads and wondered what Dallas Eakins was thinking in this case. But you got to give him, the Ducks can't, their success this year can't just fall on everybody else but him. He has to get some credit for their success. It's only fair, because he's been a part of that as much as the players and the other coaching staff and the new additions to the coaching staff have been this year. So he deserves it, and I think he should definitely be in the running for a contract extension and to continue being the Ducks head coach. I think a lot of it ends up depending on who the general manager is. I think that's the first decision that gets made, whether it's Jeff Solomon or somebody else, and then the ownership group will have a talk with that new general manager and what they want to do with the coaching staff at that point. So Dallas Eakins is certainly putting himself in a good spot to get an extension, and that's all you can ask for from him. The Ducks are 17-9-5, firmly atop of the Pacific Division now. I know Calgary and Edmonton, and I even think Vegas have games in hand, but even if they won all those games in hand, which they probably won't, they would only be a couple points in front of the Ducks. So the Ducks are firmly in that race to be atop the Pacific Division, which is something, almost halfway through the season that we never thought we'd be talking about. So I think he should definitely be in the running here. I mean, he mentioned, Friedman mentioned Berube and Evanson. Evanson's clearly going to get a contract extension the way that Minnesota is playing this year. And I would imagine Berube will too, unless St. Louis wants to move in a different direction. So I would expect Dallas Eakins to be at the top of that list, along with a few other names, depending who's available at the end of the year. And if I had to pick right now, I'll admit I wasn't saying this before. That I always said I don't know if Dallas Eakins is the guy to lead the Ducks to the next level, to being competitive. He's a great transition coach, but I don't know if he's going to be able to take them to that next level. I'm not there yet, but I'm starting to come around a little bit that he might be the guy. He's gotten a lot out of some of the Ducks players this year that really needed to take a step forward. He's really, and I don't know, again, if it's just him or if it's a bunch of other factors, you can't really tell, but there's a lot of guys that have taken steps forward this year, and Dallas Eakins has shown a lot of confidence in Zegras and Terry and Drysdale, and helped them really, and Sam Carrick even, and helped them take that step forward. So I think he definitely deserves to be at the top of that list and be in the discussion when they are talking about an extension or bringing in a new head coach. I think he's deserved that and earned that. And last topic of the show today, in that same article by Elliot Friedman, he mentions that the Coyotes are listening on Jakob Chychrun. Apparently they had received a couple, or the Islanders were interested back in the summer, I believe it was, and the price was just astronomical, and which makes sense. If you're selling Jakob Chychrun before the start of this season, the guy just came off an 18-goal, 41.56 game season, where he is now on a $4.6 million contract for the rest of this year and the 3 after this. So that's just a steal, a bargain that any team would be interested in, especially the season he came off of last year for a struggling Coyotes team. I would imagine the price is still just as high despite his struggles this year. He's only got 2 goals and 5 assists for 7 points in 26 games, so a real far cry from what he did last year. But the Coyotes are probably the worst team in the National Hockey League, and it's really hard for anybody to look good on that team, let alone a guy who has to play like 29 minutes a night for the worst team in the league. So I would imagine there would be a long list of teams that would be interested in Jakob Chychrun, and I think the Ducks should be one of those teams. It obviously depends on the price. You're not moving a Zegras, you're not moving a Drysdale to get him. You're not moving anybody key young players on this roster already. You'd be looking at probably the 2022 first, which is starting to look like it's not as big of a deal, especially if you can bring in a younger player as effective already as Jakob Chychrun. You'd be looking at one of the Ducks' kind of next level prospects, and maybe a Perreault, a Pastuov, a Tracy, somebody like that, and then probably another prospect on top of that, along with a roster player, maybe for the Ducks at least, to make the cap work. And I think there's contingent deals here if the Ducks were to pull this off, which makes it really difficult. Is that if you're bringing in Jakob Chychrun, you're likely sending Hampus Lindholm out the door. Recouping the prospects or players at least that you are dumping out for Jakob Chychrun, you're getting in a deal for Hampus Lindholm. I doubt Lindholm could be included in a deal for Chychrun. I don't see why Arizona would want him, especially if they're looking to deal Chychrun. I don't think they're looking to add an older player in the same position. You never know, but I would imagine if you're selling Jakob Chychrun, you're going full rebuild at this point and hoping that you get Shane Wright and can build around him and start fresh. And I think that's what the Coyotes are hoping they can do here. But for the Ducks, if it means going from Lindholm to Chychrun, you go from a guy who's going to be turning 28 to a guy who's going to be turning 24. You avoid having to sign Hampus Lindholm to potentially a $7 to $8 million long-term contract, and you get Jakob Chychrun for the next 3 years after this one at $4.6 million. So that's huge for the Ducks to be able to have some of that cap relief, and if they are as good as they think they are, to try and make a run over the next 3 years when Zegras and Drysdale are still on their entry-level contracts, and you've got Terry on a pretty sweet deal, as well as guys like Maxime Comtois. So I don't know if the Ducks are ready for that type of run, but this would be the time to do it if they think they can. And obviously Zegras and Drysdale and Perreault comes up and Terry continue their progress. This would be the time to do it, the type of move to bring in a guy, this young with a great contract. And I think when you look at potentially a top 4 defense of Fowler, Chychrun, Drysdale, and potentially Zellweger when he gets here, or if you add another right-handed defenseman to replace Josh Manson, or even if you keep Josh Manson, I wouldn't say you should, but you could potentially keep Josh Manson at that point and run with those 4 for the time being. So I think it's something the Ducks should explore, as it always is with young players like this who come out on the market. And the 22, 23-year-old range, guys who can jump right into your lineup and make an impact immediately. We talked about Jake DeBrusk and a few others in the past. These are the types of deals the Ducks should be in on. Eichel, as an example, they should be looking at the price for this. They should be putting their name and their hat in the ring and trying to acquire a player like this, as we watch Jakob Chychrun score on the Ducks in the highlights here. But yeah, I imagine he probably doesn't get moved. Even if the Coyotes are rebuilding, you would think you'd want to keep a 23-year-old young defenseman on a great contract around. But hey, if the price is right and if the Ducks can go out and get him, I think he'd be a great acquisition to the Ducks, and let alone any team that could go out and get a player like him. But that's going to do it for today. Another great win, as we mentioned last night. Some great topics to discuss. We'll be back tomorrow morning with the last Ducks Morning Brew of the week. scrape together some topics for that one, preview the game against the Arizona Coyotes, and prepare you guys for the weekend. We will be back this weekend with a regular edition of the podcast. Not sure who's going to be joining us on that one. Hopefully we can get a full crew, if not just 3 of us on that show to get some different voices on there and get some opinions. Steven and I are working on setting up another Ducks prospect update with the key guys, McTavish, Zellweger, Pastyuov, heading to the World Junior Championship. That means they won't be playing any games until December 26th. And we have it's kind of a good time to update you on how they've been doing and how the other players in the CHL and in Europe and overseas have been doing as well. We're looking to get a guest on as well that knows a lot more about prospects than both of us, to kind of chat about those guys, chat about McTavish, Pastyuov, Zellweger, their roles potentially at the World Junior Championship and what we can look forward to. So that one will be a lot of fun, hoping to get that one set up relatively soon and get it released before Christmas. But appreciate you guys coming out today, and as I mentioned, we'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Take care.